All right, so you're struggling to handle those GT3 and LMDh cars and Automobilista too.
Yeah,
All that oversteer, huh?
especially when you try to put the power down.
Yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at in this deep dive.
We're going to help you tame those beasts.
Yeah, it can be tricky, but good news is
Good news.
there are some surprisingly simple setup tweaks you can make.
That's right.
Have more fun on track.
Have a lot more fun.
Yeah, so one thing that's really fascinating to me
Yeah,
is that the game's default setups don't always maximize traction.
especially on corner exits.
Especially on corner exit, yeah, and it feels like they're setting us up for a spin.
Sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah, but I've been reading, and
Yeah.
the key to unlocking more grip
I'm
and
great.
stability might be hiding in plain sight.
Hiding in plain sight.
Rear differential settings.
Rear diff.
The rear, yeah, so you might already know this,
Right.
but the rear differential plays a huge role in how the car puts the power down to the pavement.
For sure.
And one of the most effective tweaks you can make,
Especially for GT3 cars,
oh, especially for GT3 cars, okay.
is to just increase the clutch value
Yeah.
in the rear differential settings.
Okay, so clutch, got it.
That's going to create more locking force in the differential,
Okay,
which means less wheel spin when you hit the gas.
so if I'm understanding this correctly,
Yeah.
cranking up that clutch setting will essentially,
Help the rear wheels work together
oh,
more effective.
so they're working together to put that power down
Put the power down more smoothly.
or smoothly.
Prevent those sudden snaps of oversteer.
Got it, yeah. So it's all about finding that balance between allowing the wheels to rotate at different speeds
During cornering
during cornering.
and preventing that wheel spin under acceleration.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I've also heard that going too high with the clutch setting can lead to understeer,
Yes.
especially on corner entry.
Especially corner entry.
Is there a way to fine-tune that balance even further?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And this is where those high-tech LMDh cars come in.
Oh, okay.
They actually give you a couple of extra tools to play with.
Like what?
Power ramp and coast.
Power ramp and coast. Okay.
These settings control how aggressively the differential locks up during acceleration
Yeah.
and deceleration.
Okay, so let me get this straight.
Yeah.
If I'm happy with how the car handles on corner entry, but I'm getting some snap on power,
Yeah.
I might want to ease back on the power ramp setting.
Precisely.
Okay, and if I'm finding the car feels a bit too locked on corner exit,
Yeah.
I can adjust the coast setting.
To fine-tune the differential's behavior
Okay,
during deceleration.
got it. This is starting to make a lot more sense now.
Good.
What about those times
Yeah.
when the LMDh cars feel a bit loose overall? Not just on power. I'm talking about that general feeling of the rear end wanting to step out even when you're not pushing hard.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of understanding how different setup changes interact with each other.
Got it.
In this case,
Yeah.
you might not want to mess with the differential settings.
Okay.
Instead,
Yeah.
a surprisingly effective tweak
Yeah.
is to soften the rear anti-roll bar.
Soften the rear anti-roll bar. Isn't that kind of counterintuitive?
Well,
I would have thought a stiffer bar would help keep the car more planted.
it might seem that way.
Yeah.
But remember, we're aiming for that sweet spot between grip and responsiveness.
Okay.
A softer rear anti-roll bar allows the rear wheels to move
Yeah.
more independently,
Okay.
which actually helps them maintain better contact with the track surface,
Okay.
especially over bumps and dips.
So by letting the rear end work a little more freely,
Yeah.
we're actually increasing grip and reducing that tail happy feeling.
Exactly.
Okay.
And remember, this is just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Damper settings, specifically bump and rebound,
Yeah.
also play a crucial role in how the car handles,
Especially on bumpy tracks.
especially on bumpy tracks.
Right. Okay, got it.
All right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Great. Damper settings,
Yeah.
they can make a world of difference.
Yeah.
Think of them as the shock absorbers
Yeah.
that control how the car reacts to weight transfer
Okay.
during braking, acceleration,
Yeah.
and those bumps.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned softening the bump and rebound settings
Okay.
allows the car to react more smoothly
Okay.
to those weight shifts.
Yeah.
But it's a balancing act.
So if I'm on a super smooth track like Monza,
Uh-huh.
softening the dampers too much could actually make the car feel less stable?
Exactly.
Really?
Imagine the car bouncing around on those high-speed compressions.
Oh, yeah.
Not ideal
Not ideal, no.
for maintaining speed or a consistent racing line.
No, not at all.
Right.
So it sounds like adapting our approach based on the specific car,
Absolutely.
the track we're racing on.
Yes.
Even the weather conditions is key.
It's not about finding some magic combination of settings that works perfectly everywhere. It's about understanding how those changes interact with the car's dynamics and how to tailor them to different scenarios.
Got it.
Think of it this way.
Yeah.
Each track has its own personality, its own unique set of challenges.
So it's not just about memorizing a bunch of setup tweaks.
Right.
It's about understanding how to analyze how the car is behaving.
Exactly.
Making informed decisions based on what I'm feeling on the track.
That's what separates those who are consistently fast
Yeah.
from those who are always chasing their tails.
Right.
And the more you experiment and understand the impact of each change, the better you'll become at reading the car's feedback.
So like just taking it slow.
Don't be afraid to start with small adjustments, one change at a time.
Okay.
And really pay attention to how the car responds.
I have to admit, I'm usually tempted to just throw a bunch of changes at the car and hope for the best.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
But taking the time to understand those cause and effect relationships will pay dividends in the long run.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've covered the differential, the anti-roll bar, the dampers, the importance of adaptability.
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to this idea of adjusting the setup based on the specific track.
Okay.
Do you have any real-world examples?
I like your way of thinking.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at two very different tracks.
Okay.
Monza and Brands Hatch.
Okay, Monza and Brands Hatch, yeah.
As you know,
Two very different tracks.
Monza is that high-speed circuit with long straights and sweeping corners.
Yeah.
In contrast,
Yeah.
Brands Hatch is tight and twisty with lots of elevation changes.
Got it.
Imagine you're setting up your GT3 car for Monza.
Okay.
What are your priorities?
Well, for Monza, I'd want a car that's stable at high speeds.
Right.
Can maintain its composure through those long, fast corners.
So you'd probably want a slightly stiffer rear anti-roll bar to minimize body roll and maybe even stiffen the dampers a touch to keep the car from bottoming out on those high-speed compressions.
To keep it from bottoming out, okay, I see how that would make the car feel more planted at those speeds.
Right.
But what about Brands Hatch?
You're absolutely right.
It's a whole different animal.
At Brands Hatch, agility and responsiveness are crucial.
Okay.
Think about how you need a car that can dance through those tight corners.
Yeah.
And handle those elevation changes.
Okay, so I want a softer setup for Brands Hatch?
Exactly.
Okay.
You might consider softening that rear anti-roll bar
Okay.
to allow the rear end to rotate more easily and maybe even soften the dampers a bit to help the tires maintain contact with the bumpy surface.
So it's about tuning the car to work with the track, not against it.
That's a great way to think about it.
That's a great way to think about it, yeah. This is starting to make a lot more sense.
And this is just scratching the surface.
Really?
There's so much depth to car setup, so many factors to consider. It's about becoming a student of each track.
Okay.
Understanding its nuances.
Yeah.
And tailoring your setup to match.
Got it.
The more you learn and experiment, the better you'll become at extracting the maximum performance from your car.
Okay.
But most importantly, have fun with it.
This has been incredibly insightful.
You did. Definitely on the right track.
I feel like I'm finally starting to get a handle on this whole car setup thing.
And remember, mastery takes time, patience, and that willingness to constantly learn and adapt.
That's great advice. Well, this brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive. But don't go anywhere, because in part 3, we're going to wrap things up by taking everything we've learned and looking ahead at what you, our listener, can start doing differently to really dial in your setup. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
You've been with us as we've explored the sometimes confusing world of car setup in Automobilista 2.
That's right.
Specifically, we've been focusing on those GT3 and LMDh cars and how to really dial in your setup to tame oversteer and unlock more speed and consistency.
Yeah, we've dug into the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, from the rear differential and its settings to the anti-roll bars and even those damper settings that can make a huge difference on bumpy tracks like Brands Hatch.
Yeah, and what's been really eye-opening is that it's not just about memorizing a bunch of settings.
Right.
It's about understanding how those settings work together.
Yeah.
And how to adjust them.
Based on the car.
Based on the car.
The track, even the weather conditions.
The weather, right?
The goal is to develop a feel for how each change impacts the car's behavior.
Exactly.
Use that knowledge to adapt your setup and really make the car dance through those corners.
Absolutely.
Speaking of adapting, let's turn our attention directly to you.
Okay.
Think about those two very different tracks we've been talking about. Monza with its high-speed corners and Brands Hatch with its tight and twisty layout.
Yeah.
How would you approach setting up your car differently for those two circuits?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really challenges you to put all the pieces together.
Right.
At Monza, you're looking for stability at those high speeds, so a slightly stiffer setup, particularly in the rear, is usually the way to go.
Okay, that makes sense. A stiffer rear anti-roll bar.
Right.
Slightly stiffer dampers would help keep the car planted through those long, sweeping corners.
Exactly.
But what about Brands Hatch? Would you go completely the other way with the setup there?
You're on the right track.
Okay.
For Brands Hatch, you need a car that's nimble and responsive.
Okay.
So a softer setup is usually preferred.
Got it.
Think about softening that rear anti-roll bar to allow the rear end to rotate more freely and potentially softening the dampers as well to help the tires maintain contact with the surface.
It's fascinating how the same car can require such different setups depending on the track.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're tuning the car to match the personality of each circuit.
That's a great way to put it.
And remember, these are just starting points.
Right.
The beauty of sim racing is that you can experiment as much as you want.
Experiment as much as you want. Don't be afraid to tweak those settings.
Yeah.
Analyze the data, and most importantly, trust your feel on the track.
So what's the biggest takeaway you want our listener to walk away with from this deep dive?
That's easy.
Okay.
Mastering car setup is a journey, not a destination.
Ooh, I like that.
The more you learn, the more you experiment.
Yeah.
The better you'll become at getting the most out of those incredible cars.
That's some great advice. So keep pushing those limits, keep learning, and most importantly, keep having fun out there on the virtual track.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.